What's going on, y'all? It's J Smo Reviews here, back at it again with another video, man. Bringing you guys a hypocritical video. We're going to do some truth-telling in here today. We're going to have some jokes as well, and who better to start with than myself? I've been saying for the last couple of videos that I will not be speaking on, again, continuing to speak on, nothing more with the John Bullpen Endgame Cassidy fiasco. I was done with it. I already spoke about it twice. Every time you look at what bloggers are talking about, it's another John video, right? It's just the never-ending story. So that was true. I had no interest on speaking on it up until earlier today. When I go online, you know what I'm saying? Just want to go on Twitter, see what's going on. And I see JJDD himself seeking legal advice or legal backing in an argument from ChatGPT. When I saw that, I said, stop. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. It's too much ridiculousness, foolishness, tomfoolery, and nonsense. And it can't go on any longer. So I'm going to give my thoughts, I guess, in totality of what's been going on. I'll try to keep it quick because it seems to be a lot of topics. People have made like 3 hours worth of content. I'm not that invested in it, but I want to laugh at a couple of things with you guys. So that's what we're going to do. So like I said, some truth-telling, some jokes, and also some appreciation because even though, things have been bad, a lot of bad coming out of the Bullpen camp recently, overall in Bullpen's history, a lot more good than bad. So I want to talk about in the second half of the video my picks for the top 5 bullpen events of all time. In the league's history, because they've given, even as recent as earlier in 2024, before all the Endgame stuff happened, they were having a really good year. So, of course, I'm always going to find a way to talk about some actual raps in there. And before, because we are just going to talk about that, the John stuff, but I want to give a shout out to we the fans, and of course Frank White specifically. And if you guys don't know, I feel like a lot of people do know at this point who Frank White is, but if you don't, he's a battle rap sponsor. He's been helping the culture out for the last couple of years, even as recent, as this year. Lux versus Twerk, he had a part in that. Twerk versus Big K going back to power moves, and Danny versus King this year, one of the best battles of 2025. So, and more importantly, just someone that I enjoy, talk to him. One of the people I talk to, I'd say the most within battle rap, joking-wise, ideas-wise. It's just fun to talk battle rap with Frank. I feel like he still has that kind of passion for the game and the real raps part of it, while also being a joke a little. He knows the respect and appreciation I got for him, and appreciate him for the hoodies. Very comfortable, good product, and got here quickly. So shout out we the fans, shout out Frank, and with all that being said, let's talk about the nonsense. So, starting with the Endgame event, and like I said, this topic has been over-talked. There's so many details, so I'm going to use key components and key points. We're going to focus on that. Why are people upset with the Endgame event? Cassidy no-showed. He didn't show up, ended up being bad for the fans, the event itself, John, and it's really led to all this. The other reason people are unhappy is because rappers specifically, even though also Avocado is in the mix now, but people did not get paid from this event. And Danny Myers is the most obvious example, and we are going to talk about that a little bit as I kind of go down this timeline. So John, who's been more vocal recently, which is why I think now there's this third wind to the story, because now he's giving his side, but there's just so many inconsistencies, kind of things that don't make sense. But John talks about how people getting paid, right? The reason that the money got fucked up, for him, for even some of the artists on the card, is Cassidy no-showing. And that a lot of stuff that for the event's success or, payment-wise really depended on Cassidy showing up. And no matter where John's talked about it, the Hip Hop is Real interviews, so on and so forth, he stood firm on this all starts with Cassidy not showing up. And I'm inclined to agree a little bit there. There will not be a lot of agreeing in this video, but I don't want us to stray too far from the fact that Cassidy said he was sick, and that's why he didn't go. And then months later, when he finally came out of hiding to talk about it, he said it's because of bad business. Now, it does appear the event had quite a bit of bad business, but if he had just said that off rip, I actually think people would have understood. I just think Cassidy didn't want to do the event. The undercard wasn't all that, which was one of his biggest complaints. It wasn't promoed crazy. So I'm sure he's like, this is kind of like an situation, and I'm just not even going to have my brand attached to it, does not mean you should be no-showing the event, and that is still very fucked up. However, first big sin I think John made, battlers or people getting paid depending on Cassidy showing up. When you were gonna book an event, I think I've said this a lot of times with like small leagues that sometimes will book bigger names and stuff, and you hear about the business going bad. If you do not have the money then, that no matter if the event turns out to be successful or non-successful, you have to be able to pay those artists off rip, because them getting paid, them showing up and doing their thing, like, that's what they get their check for. That can't be dependent on anything else except them coming to do their part of the contract. It's as simple as that. Even with a big celebrity name like Cassidy and all the talks of grandeur of what this event could have done and the possibilities, that's cool, but people got to get paid no matter if it's a complete flop or if it ends up being the biggest success. So that's one where, yes, it's fucked up the domino effect that Cassidy caused, but in business, you just can't even... I'm not saying you necessarily have to plan for that, but even if that situation was to occur, that cannot affect anyone else on the card getting paid. Like, there's just no way around that. I can't see any way around that. And then that leads you into the Danny Myers thing, where even though it came out really way after the fact, Danny Myers saying, I didn't get paid. And John, in his sit-down with Hip Hop is Real, which I see a lot of people not a big fan of, calling it a friendly interview, right? But he's pretty blunt with the Danny situation, where he says Danny even speaking up, basically knowing the situation and knowing what John was going through, was disrespectful in his eyes, even though it's just Danny being like, hey man, can I get the rest of my money? But that was seen as disrespect, because he's saying Danny's complaining about a couple $100, right? While I took like a truly big loss from this event, like one that kind of fucked life up a little bit for me, which I do believe is true with the demeanor of John, knowing what goes into an event, and if it was a complete flop like that, like with all those things, yeah, it's fucked up, but just because it's worse for you doesn't mean you still don't owe this man a couple $100. And him saying, well, where's the rest of my money? If it's $10, if it's $1,000, like, he's owed that money. Like, we're not going to make it out like Danny's corny or out of pocket for being like, hey, the rest of my check, please. Like, I rapped on stage that day. So that's kind of the second one for me, where I'm like, I don't really know. I think, Danny too, like, and you see him in a lot of these kind of like, unfortunately, as the years have gone on, like drama-based situations, people talking crazy to Danny. And since that's happened a few times, maybe John just felt comfortable being like, Danny, go fuck yourself, is what it is. But I'm not with that either. I think he handled that poorly. So that's two right there where I'm like, you're having a check dependent on someone else, even if they do their job. Not down with that. And then you have the Danny part of things. So time goes on, and there's still things that we don't like fully 100% like know, like with Avocado. I think that's an interesting part of it. Talk of Avocado not getting paid. I know John pretty much alluding or saying like Avocado getting paid wasn't from him. And we're going to talk about this, what John owns and what he doesn't own regarding to this event. But basically saying, once the battles came out on Tubi, that must mean Avocado handled whatever he did with the third party, which I believe would be Broken Glass Pictures. That seems to be whose producer put the footage out now that it's on Tubi. But I kind of want to know. Maybe we won't know, and whatever, life moves on. But I feel like Avocado's kind of side of the story would be pretty interesting on shedding light on how this all 100% went down. But the battles go up on Tubi after nobody knew what was going to happen with the footage. They go up, which I will say, in terms of footage distribution, I remember in a lead-up, like an Endgame promo interview that John did with Hip Hop is Real, before Endgame actually ended up going down, I believe it's when he gave the tour of the venue, he spoke about someone from Paramount coming to watch or being interested in this. Because I remember specifically, because then he followed that up with, Paramount, don't they own Disney or something? Which is just... and I'll never forget John saying that. Maybe that was a sign at the time. Maybe we should have known. But, I felt like there was always a little bit of noise if you paid attention about possible distribution beyond just like a YouTube drop or something like that. But very clearly that wasn't made clear to the artist whose battles went up there, because they're like, yo, were on Tubi. Jazz was joking about it. Tay-Rock was joking about it. Some of the other artists, right? So then that's like the second wind of this whole story is the footage ending up there. And that's when we get into, I think that's a good segue, because I know, John and Battlefax going back and forth. Battlefax buying Bullpen and stuff. Like, that's like low, like, junk food kind of like entertainment, in my opinion. Like, you could go down that route, but then you get to John responding, right? And this is where I think you really have to break down, because the investors and this and all that come out. So John, and we'll talk about the footage specifically, but he's talking about very cryptically on like how he knows things or is kind of involved, but then when it comes to someone getting paid or something, he's just like not involved. You know what I mean? Like, when it comes to the footage here, he's saying, the footage being on Tubi, I had nothing to do with that. He says specifically, nobody asked me if I knew about it, so that he knew about it, but I had nothing to do with that. Later in the interview, he also says that he owns that footage. So which one is it? Like, it can't be both of them. And then anytime there was some clarity asked for there, he'd be like, well, I can only speak on so much with confidentiality. And in business, really none of this should be out in the public. That is another thing I do agree with John on. It's disgusting it's all went this way, but if you do like real wacky business, if it's bad enough, then it is what it is. You got to deal with that. But so it's all out here. He's talking about, he kind of like, I don't really know where it sits with him having the footage. And then he was saying he had nothing to do with paying Avo, who has like physically had the footage, and that's why it didn't come out for a minute. So that's all cryptic, and I don't get that. But this one, and this is directly pertaining to the cease and desist, or him trying to stop the Cassidy versus Easy battle. He says very specifically, between the 12 minutes and 15-minute mark of that 50-plus minute interview on Hip Hop Is Real, I don't have the exact timestamp, but it's right in there. He talks about him and Bullpen never actually having fully the rights to specifically the John versus Cassidy battle. Once again, inferring that maybe the third party are the ones that actually own the rights to that, since they were trying to get like a deal, like a long-term thing on and popping. Like, this was just going to be the start, and if this succeeded, then it would go on and on for battle rap. So he says he did not own the rights, and then follows that up with, if they were to, there was a 6-month window. John's words, I believe this is all 12 minutes to 15 minutes. If they were to reschedule, they have a 6-month window to do so. But the third party is the one that would be doing that. So he doesn't own the battle, right? He doesn't own the battle. And there was a 6-month window to rebook, or the situation just kind of evaporated. John, what the fuck are you sending a cease and desist for? What are you ceasing and desisting? Because apparently you never owned it. So I don't understand what he can stop. And this is what I mean by the ridiculousness, the tomfoolery, and the nonsense. I don't really know what he's talking about there if he didn't own it. So maybe he's saying he has receipts for all these things, and we truly, outside of the people directly that did the business between that whoever he was doing the work with on Broken Glass Productions, himself, nobody, I guess, knows down to a detail. So maybe he just has something that will make us all look silly. But from what I'm hearing, from what I'm gathering, it doesn't make any goddamn sense. How can you send a cease and desist for something you were just saying that you never owned? And I don't, it's hard. So much lying happens somewhere in here. Because it can't, with the footage, it can't be you own it, but you don't control it. It had nothing to do with it. It can't be both. With the Cassidy thing, it can't be I never owned it. There was only a 6-month window to rebook, but now you're going to turn around and send a cease and desist. It cannot be both. So clearly, at some point in there's a story getting mixed up, and that's what leads people to say the things that you are lying. Because I do believe, to some extent, not sure every truth, every lie, right? But somewhere in there, lies are happening, because we just don't get here. The stories, multiple battlers saying they're not getting paid, which, listen, you took the biggest hit when that event goes down. And I can understand being like, and he says in there, he's like, the place where I was at mentally, I was like, fuck it. And he actually takes some accountability. So one thing I'd say he took accountability for is, there was constant stories, it seems like, from anyone involved with this, talking about John like kind of ghosting on communication or just being hard to reach when it was time to get those payments. And that's why it's the situation it is. And he took some accountability there, but then obviously turned around and told Danny to like eat a frank for just being like, hey man, can I get my 200? So, but it's a mess. It's been handled very, very messy, kind of crazy. Somewhere in between all this, John and Swamp was as good as it was. I already gave that battle a ton of credit, and it goes to show like the level of talent John is, because it's bad out here for him right now. You know what I'm saying? Especially optically with the battle rap community, and he can still go up there and have battle of the night on a fairly large event versus Swamp. But this is nonsense, man. And at the end of the day, even though, when I said in the beginning, if I did say in the beginning, I think Cassidy 100% should be holding like a big portion of blame for all this, the no-show, the nonsense, but John's handled everything so poorly that people have forgotten, or even worse, forgiven Cassidy just because everything else looks like such a zoo that how could you trust John in this type of situation? I think that might be the hardest thing, is that this is far from the first time that Bullpen and John have had like business issues where people said it was a bit shaky or it looked a bit shaky, and it's always vague and it's always Mr. Fab and now it's always this. At the end of the day, everybody can't be lying. Not saying you did wrong in every single situation. It's exactly what the story that's put out there, but that you don't end up in this situation if you did everything right. I'll tell you that right now. So that's kind of like my full timeline and thoughts. It's turned into pure fucking stupidity. All of these lawsuits are not happening, and I have no advice isn't the word, because I can't give advice to someone. I have never been in any of these circumstances John's in, as a battle rapper, as a league owner. I see some people saying he's like finished. I don't think that at all, especially as a battler. League owner, probably, because I just don't. Where's the trust to have another Bullpen event with the business claims out there? Do you even have the money to go and produce a Bullpen event? I don't know if there's a sponsor anywhere nearby anymore, right? So all those things. But as a battler, I think John's going to be fine. Whether he decides to stay active and fight through it, because he'll hear the angle 4 or 5 times over, depending on how good he combats it. I mean, look, it whooped them. Some of these whooped them versus Fonz, turned around versus Swamp, and it's a very good battle. You can debate he won. So either stay active through it, or maybe he takes a break, because he just doesn't. I'm sure it's hard to get motivated or have love for battle rap with the constant noise on his name and what's going on with him right now. But it's mostly self-inflicted. So it's hard for me to like throw him any sympathy. I understand the human aspect of it, but at the end of the day, there's just maybe some more accountability being taken. I mean, it's just one of those things. I think it'll pass. So many topics come and go within battle rap, but every time he's being, I feel like, on the offensive about it with these lawsuits, these cryptic tweets about the biggest battle he has coming up, and I guess it's referring to this. This is not helping at all, especially when you're stepping over your own words and points multiple times when you finally do speak on the topic. But that is my full thoughts on that portion of the video, the Endgame saga, if you will. A lot of nonsense, and of course, you guys let me know, what do you agree with? What do you disagree with? I know it is a trending topic, and there's been a lot of chapters to it, so any thoughts you have on it, or anything you want to combat, agree with me on, please let me know in the comment section down below. But now we can get to a little bit more positive side of this video, right? My picks for the top 5 events that Bullpen has thrown. Like I said, it's almost like I don't know if I'll talk about them again. Like, if this truly is the end for the league, which I think is very possible, this could be the last time I really have any reason to speak on it, unless somehow, snowball's chance in hell, probably even less than that, pulling a rabbit out of a hat, John is able to stop the Cassidy versus Easy battle. Because, of course, then we'll have to talk about all this another time, because that would be major news. But I think it's highly unlikely. So we're going to talk about my picks for what the league has done, some of those key events they put on. And funny thing is, before Endgame, right, when 2024, Bullpen was doing really good before Endgame. John had brought up, I remember on Twitter one day, like, what's stopping Bullpen from being a top league? Like, what defines a top league? Basically, like, making a claim, like, don't call us a small league or anything, that we're competing at a top level. You know what stopped Bullpen from being a top league? the first like 14, 15 minutes of what we talked about in this video. So, is what it is. Funny how life comes around. But at the number 5 spot for the top 5, I want to talk about a 2016 event, Close Range. And I think some of the key bullpen events, and we'll talk about a couple that were just good across the board, top tier talent, the homegrown roster that he had. But, this is an example of, I feel like the bullpen roster really holding it down and making it a good event. I think the two most key battles for me here, even though they all include bullpen talent, are Shotgun Suge versus Bad News, and more importantly, DNA versus Loso. Kind of funny talking about Bad News in hindsight, and at this point, I thought he was ass. I thought a lot of Bad News' career, he was ass, and he was just hyped by a lot of other battle rappers who fucking abandoned him when it came time. It's just funny how life works like that. But Shotgun and Suge and News was pretty key. And then DNA versus Loso was like a very, very good battle. PC beat the dog shit out of B Magic on this card. It was only a 1-rounder, but I remember because at that point in time, like Magic had been losing and choking, but you would still hope. It's kind of funny. We've made a full circle where I feel like he's trying again in the last couple of years. But, bunch of bullpen talent that put on. I thought Close Range was a pretty solid card. At the number 4 spot, I do have the Bullpen Super Bowl event, which was the infamous 1-rounder event, where really it's 2 1-rounders that put this here, which is crazy because obviously I value 3-rounders a lot more. But Brizz's Body versus Loso, and then, of course, Tay-Rock versus Bad News are monumental 1-round battles. One of them more so being a 1-round performance because the Briz body is just so over the top. A true contender for, like, worst bodies ever. Like, it's really that bad. And then Tay-Rock versus Bad News, granted, just slandered him a little bit, but even guys that I don't think are good, like, there's some things that are just objective, right? And Bad News and Rock is objective. Rock clearly won the battle, in my opinion. I think people were crazy trying to call it debatable for all those years. But Bad News is obviously good. 1-rounder event. I don't believe, and I remember, we didn't know that was going to be a 1-rounder event. All the way back then. A little bit of questionable stuff. This is going to be a 1-rounder. It didn't end up mattering because the performances were just so powerful, but the signs that were shown early on. So that's the one I have at number 4. Just goes to show the power of basically 2 rounds putting it up in the top 5. Then at the number 3 spot, my bad, I'm like keeping the battle list up here so I can remember them as I go. But at the number 3 spot, we do have Fade 2016. And when it's all said and done, we're done with the 5. I think it's safe to say like the Fade series, even though I think it was pretty much only 2 cards, was like the best series that Bullpen put together. But the Fade card also early in Bullpen's time, to me, is like one of the best. You have DNA versus Chef Trez. Maybe the best battle that Bullpen ever had. Like, DNA and Chef Trez is like very, very, very good. You have Excel versus Loso is on this card, which also is a pretty good battle. And then K-Shine versus Sharon actually is part of the Fade 2016 card. And this is after Shine slapping Sharon, so there's more of a storyline. Shine's pretty good in the battle, but Sharon is like amazing. It's one of the more impressive wins that Sharon has versus a URL artist, which I think is saying something. So, pretty dope. It's kind of going back in time. If you guys were there for it, you remember it. K-Shine had the Pokemon Go Squirtle bar. So for me, made it to the top 3. And then you have my picks for the top 2 events that Bullpen put out. And at the runner-up, speaking of the good 2024 they had, we have Politics as Usual. So even in the year where Bullpen probably like just went broke, I guess, is like kind of like, I guess, the logic behind it, or where it was finished by the end, they had, in my opinion, one of their 2 best events ever, and that is Politics as Usual, which was the mayor getting involved as a sponsor, and it's pretty recent, so I think most of you guys remember it, but T-Top versus Chef Trez, fire. Calico versus John John, a mean body from John John, and like a very, very good performance at that. Arsenal versus Bad News beating Arsenal in a judge battle. I thought it was a good battle. Tay-Rock versus Loso, like very good. You know how good the crowd was that night? Gwitty versus Super Black was a watchable battle. So the energy was great. I know that they got like a ton of money from like the judge battles. Mayor was just, it was just Christmas over there. I remember they had golden steaks. So I know it was fun there in the building, and I thought watching it on camera, I had it as a top 5 event for last year. So it goes to show you the quality they had. And then at the number 1 spot, for my opinion, the best event that Bullpen put on, it is the other Fade card, Fade 2017, and this has got a lot of just like important battles for the time. Most importantly, Loso versus B-Dot, which was like a dialogue-based convo. Even the title here, Christianity versus Comedic Science. So anyone that's seen that battle, and if you haven't, please go watch Loso versus B-Dot. Very, very good. Always felt like B-Dot won clearly, but Loso put up like a great performance. John versus Chilla Jones is on this card. Another really good battle, and one of the better ones. I felt like John lost a lot battling on Bullpen, and it is hard to like run an event that night and rap. So a lot of times, like, it's something that I've held against him, but it's somewhat understandable. It wasn't just happening for some reason. And John versus Chilla, one of John's better performances on his own league, while Chilla was also very, very good. K-Shine versus Bad News. K-Shine whooped on Bad News, but it's a very, very good performance. B-Magic versus Clone. Clone won that battle. Bad News and Clone battles, maybe it was a bad idea doing this top 5. But jokes aside, for me, Fade 2017 had the best collection of like quality battles and also relevant battles that to this day I think were key points in a few of these big names' careers. And that's why for me, Fade 2017 is the best event that Bullpen Battle League put on in their time, and maybe their possible time we'll see going forward. But that is my full top 5 here for Bullpen, and that's kind of just, this is like a whole Bullpen John centric video. So that's my thoughts. You got some stuff here that heavy criticism, which is deserved. That's why we're in the place we're at now. But at the same time, also recognizing what Bullpen and what John brought to the culture. And if this is the end for them, I do appreciate their contributions, even if it's ending on a bad note. But with all that being said, I said it earlier in the video, but you guys let me know your thoughts on the John stuff, the Endgame stuff, Cassidy and Easy possibly being blocked, even though I think that there's no chance it is getting it's getting stopped by John here. And then also for these top Bullpen events, I know it's kind of going in the archives for some of these, but do you have a favorite battle from Bullpen, a favorite event, a favorite performance from Bullpen? I'm sure a lot of you guys, it's Brizz's 1 round versus Loso. But even if it is that, let me know in the comment section down below, man. And as I said in my last video, a lot of events coming up this weekend. My Twitter's always in the description, and I do live updates and give my thoughts as I go. So I'm going to be doing a lot of that. And of course, expect recaps Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, somewhere in there. I can't promise which day, but of course, there's going to be a lot of coverage for what's going on this weekend. But it's been J Smo Reviews again here, y'all. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'm going to catch you on the next one, man. Peace.